Okay, so again, good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm Connie Kohlmeyer. I'm an educator with the Conservation Foundation. And for those of you who are just joining the Conservation Foundation and just getting to know us a little bit, we are a nonprofit organization. We are proud to be accredited by the Land Trust Accreditation Commission. And our mission is to improve the health of our community by preserving and restoring our natural areas and open spaces, protecting rivers and watersheds, and promoting stewardship of our environment. This is very important work. It helps to preserve our quality of life. Open space along rivers and streams protects our water quality and our drinking water. Open space improves our air quality, preserves wildlife habitat, and creates opportunities for people to enjoy the outdoors, including with kids, which we'll be talking about for our topic this evening. We would like to thank Itasca Bank and Trust for sponsoring this webinar. Sponsors are very important to help us keep these webinars free for everyone. So if you would like to sponsor as well, like Itasca Bank, please contact us. I will share our contact information in the chat, and I will also post a link for our sponsors website in the chat and on YouTube when we post the recording. You, the viewers, can also help us to keep these webinars free. If you enjoy the webinars, we encourage you to please donate to help TCF continue to do all the wonderful things we do, including and in addition to our webinars. When you become a member of the Conservation Foundation, you'll also enjoy a wide variety of members-only offerings. And with 2022 being the 50th anniversary of the Conservation Foundation, we have some really fun things on the calendar and a lot of events happening this year that are going to be a lot of fun. You can also follow us on social media to learn more and stay up to date on events and happenings. And just a couple of upcoming events that we have coming up soon. Our webinar for next month is going to be on Wednesday evening, August 3rd at 7 p.m. And our topic is urban stormwater and how you can help keep our rivers clean. We're going to join the Conservation Foundation's own Alex Handel to learn some simple things we can do at home to help keep our waterways clean. And we also have coming up, we still have a few spots, not very many, but we have a couple spots still open for our kids camps. So for our summer camps that are called Nature on the Farm summer camps. And those are a lot of fun. We've got different grades depending on the age level of your kids. And we can talk a little bit more about that and answer questions if anyone has them. But some of these fun pictures that you'll see on here are pictures from camp. They're a whole lot of fun. And those camps are just for the kids, unfortunately. Sorry to all the adults, but the adults can also come and join us at the farm on July 27th. We have a family adventure coming up and the whole family can come out and join for that. It is also farm stand season. So starting this Saturday and then also on Wednesday evenings, Saturdays from 9 a.m. to noon and Wednesday evenings starting next week from 3 until 6 p.m. on Wednesdays, all the way through October. You can stop by the farm if you're local and pick up your local fresh organic produce. And for this evening's topic, tips and tricks for exploring nature with kids, we have a panel of a few of my fellow educators joining us this evening. So Amy Phillips and Carolyn Wagner have some great ideas for us coming up, but I'd first like to introduce you to Allison Paul, the Conservation Foundation's Vice President of Community Conservation, who is also a certified forest therapy guide. And she's got some great information and ideas to get us started this evening. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Allison and we'll get going on our topic for tonight.
Welcome, everyone. We're super excited that you're here. And for those of you watching live and those of you watching the recording, and we know this topic is needed for you because it's a beautiful summer evening and you're inside on a screen. So we might need to give you a few tips to get outside so you can close that computer and get outside a little bit more ourselves. So we're going to talk with you a little bit today about why it's important to get kids outside and give you some tangible take-home tools for what you can do to engage young folks in nature. Before we get started, we asked this in the poll, but when I actually asked that maybe people plug it into the chat, what's one of your most memorable outdoor experiences from your childhood? And the panelists can plug in too if they want to. And I just want to say, note that I said memorable. I didn't say favorite, most pleasant. but what are some of your most memorable experiences in the outdoors as a child? One participant says, the woods behind my backyard, both exploring and using imagination. Great, thank you. Anyone else want to share any of their outdoor experiences? Often we see that people's memories are close to home. It doesn't have to be the biggest national park. Sometimes it's the tree in your front yard that can stand out to you. Oh, another participant says, finding wild blackberries with a grandma, climbing trees. Another person says, playing on a tree that had fallen over in a creek in the park. And that they could live in that tree over the summer. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Looking for butterflies, insects in the backyard. Wonderful. All of these stories involve both nature, but they also often involve other people, a grandmother, an adult that helps open the doors for children in the outdoors. And today more than ever, we need adults who are gonna help kids get outside and do what they do best, which is play. Ooh, snapping turtles and finding mussels and shells in a creek. Awesome. Very fun. Some people here definitely grew up by rivers. And I want to ask you now, what are some of your biggest barriers to getting kids outside today that you face, so we can help make sure we address that in our talk here today? Any challenges when you think about things that hold you back from taking young kids outside, or really of any ages? Screens. Yep. Like the ones we're on, that makes sense. We've heard from some folks that there can be a fear of pests, mosquitoes, ticks, poison ivy, things that are pesky. We'll talk about those a little bit. Let us know if there's any other barriers you'd like us to address in our talk here tonight. Sometimes people want to know where to go, and that's something we can also help with as well. Ooh, a toddler that wants to eat everything. I feel like we should talk about that. Wonderful. I'll talk about a few ways to incorporate taste when I get to my section a little bit later on as well. Feel free to chime in the chat if you have other things as we go, so we can make sure that we address that as we go. We are living at a time when we all, not just kids, have a little bit of what is called nature deficit disorder. There's been a giant increase in screen media with very little time spent outside, and this has adverse impacts for the health of kids and also the planet. Some estimate that less than 1% of child's time today is spent in the outdoors, and that includes structured sports. So the outdoors has really become sort of a place where we aren't spending a lot of time, and we need different ways to do that. So we're hopeful we can give you more tools here today. This has led to a wide range of things such as obesity. I've been on field trips with kids that their balance systems are off. Their gross motor is very difficult to navigate. The outdoors gives us these great opportunities to move our bodies in different ways that help with body awareness and help overall with our children's development. So there's a wide range of research on this. I could talk about this for hours, but we're doing 1 hour, and then I hope you all go outside. Here's my top 5 reasons here today that I'm going to share with you. So physical health, mental health, fostering creativity, our social and emotional well-being, plus it's just really fun. Physical health, you're outside and you're moving. You got to move your body in different ways. If you're probably excited, you're going to run because you want to get somewhere, not because somebody told you you had to run. So it's just good for children and us adults to move in all different ways. Here you have students doing water monitoring, running around there. It's also good for your mental health. There's a lot of documentation about the benefits of being in the outdoors. One of them is around attention restoration. This is the idea that after spending time in the outdoors, or even looking at pictures of nature, you use what you call sort of a soft focus. It's much more of a passive experience. It can help you to concentrate better. after you have been exposed to nature in some way. The next one is creativity. I don't know how many of you have houses full of these like small plastic toys. I'm a nature educator. I've got them too. Don't worry. This is a car, right? This truck, this fire engine, it's going to always be a fire engine. That fire engine can do all sorts of things. That's great. But when you're in the outdoors, your toys look much different. These sticks could be buildings. They could be bridges. They could be all sorts of different magical things that they can turn into. And it really allows kids to have a very creative experience in the outdoors. It helps foster social, emotional well-being. This is kind of a fancy way of saying it helps us reestablish our connection with ourselves, build relationships to others, and to build a sense of community. Maybe it's with that special adult that goes with you as well. And it's just fun, especially if you've done it right and you feel like you're able to relax as an adult as well and not be too worried about the risks that you've kind of always are trying to manage as a parent or a grandparent. And we know that kids need nature for their health, but we also know if we're going to protect nature moving forward, that nature is going to need kids who are going to be really big advocates for the green space around where they live. And so we're excited that you guys have all joined us to talk a little bit about that here today. We have a team of educators that will let you know different types of activities that fit different ages and different ability levels. And we're going to kick it off by talking a little bit about outdoor art projects. So with that, I will pass it over to Amy.
All right. So one of my favorite things to do with kids, both my own and the kids that I get to work with, is to take them out and help them be creative. And I know once we get to be adults, sometimes we get a little reticent. Maybe we're like, oh, well, I don't know how to draw. I'm not creative. You know, these are the stories that we tell ourselves. But the good thing is that kids don't have those stories. They are all artists and they are all creators. So we love to give kids opportunities to be creative outdoors. And so I'm going to give you a couple of quick little ideas that you can do, you can take home. We also will give you a link at the end. We have a lot of resources for you to check out whenever you're ready. So let's start with the first one. All right, so this is, I actually really, really like this. I have it right here with me today, but there's a picture down below. It's a little toolbox and we call it a DIY nature kit. So you can put sticks, you can put seeds, flowers, things that we call tree cookies, which are really just sawed off pieces of bigger branches. And then I combine it with, our regular craft kits like clay, markers, sometimes googly eyes, whatever we sort of have laying around. And what I love about this is it's completely unstructured. You put it down. So maybe if there's a day that you're really busy, but your kids aren't busy and I need something for them to do, you can kind of put them outside on, even on pavement, anywhere, give them this kit and see what they create. We've had kids create a series of little Muppets to act out a play. We've had, they create little structures. They're all like creating, so there's a lot of things with wheels, there's lots of cars, things like that. So it's just a really fun, creative way for them to keep themselves busy outside, being creative using natural objects. And speaking of natural objects, this is another one. We actually, our property is located on a 60-acre farm. So we have a lot of really interesting natural areas. So what we like to do is have the kids come out and do collections. It's even better when they collect weeds. So we can have them go pick some dandelion or some garlic mustard like these scouts we had. And then we have them create different things. But even if they're not even picking weeds, they can also be picking like little petals of a flower. We don't want them to take the whole flower because when you take the whole flower, it doesn't create a seed and then the birds don't have the seed to eat, right? So we always talk about leaving no trace, taking only what you need. And also having permission, it's okay to probably go out and pick something in your own backyard, but you don't want to go pick it in your neighbor's yard and you don't want to pick it from a forest preserve. So, but once you can find these kind of objects, the fun part is going out and finding it. That's like a hike right there, right? That's just a fun time to go out and find the collections. And then they get to be creative. And you could either do this very structured, like the wreath on the right. That was a very structured activity I created. Or I found on Pinterest actually. So, but seasonal wreaths, that was one. But then, there was another one that for our campers, they were like, go create a bug. And so then they took leaves and sticks and they made bugs. So there's lots of different objects and things you can do with found objects outside. Speaking of found objects, this is also one of my favorites. So there's a sculptor. His name is Andy Goldsworthy. He's out in the UK, and he's my favorite artist. And so whenever we talk about, when we have these programs and things, and maybe you have a favorite artist, maybe there's a painter that you really like, or maybe you really are interested in this particular person, but talk to the kids about that. Talk to them about what you like and what you find beautiful, and then help them explore what that looks like. So because I'm so drawn to Andy Goldsworthy, I bring him into as many programs as I can. So what we did was we just went and collected some objects and leaves and little flowers and seeds and walnuts and all of that kind of thing. And then they create a sculpture. And what's beautiful about this is it's ephemeral. So Andy Goldsworthy, when he makes his sculptures, the only thing that lives on is the picture, because after that, the wind blows it away and it's gone. But there's beauty in that. And I think also as a parent myself, not having to take it home is also a really good thing. It's to stay there. And then there's the old standbys of sketching. Again, we might feel a little intimidated to go sketch, but the kids aren't, trust me on that one. And then, but if you want a little prompt, there's a link down here for this 30 days of reconnection. This is something that an organization called the Biomimicry Institute put together over COVID to encourage people to go outside. So there's a lot of little prompts and different things that you can do, like identifying patterns in nature, creating sound maps. So there's some little cues there. So if it's a little paralyzing to go outside and just have a blank page, well, then this will give you a cue to do that. And then of course, indoor art. So when we give you the link, we've got a couple of interesting little coloring pages, and then, you can always paint inside and things like that. So with that, I will turn it over to Carolyn, who's going to talk about different ways to explore outside.
Good evening. I'm Carolyn Wagner, and I am the Mighty Acorns Program Coordinator. And Mighty Acorns is a stewardship-based program that we do mainly with school children. And one of the big things that we do in Mighty Acorns is exploratory hikes. And exploratory hikes are ways for children to discover nature. And so this is something that you can do with your own children, is do these discovery or exploratory hikes. And I know that might sound, very intimidating because you think, oh, I need to be an expert in birds, or I need to be an expert in insects and know how to identify different plants and trees. But really, it's all about discovery, what you can find. So one of the things that we do when we go on these discovery hikes, we are going out usually in a natural area, but honestly, they could be done anywhere. You can do an exploratory hike in your own backyard and discover what lives in your backyard. Take a close look at what lives in the plants or under the leaves. Or you could take a walk around the block and explore what kinds of different plants or animals live just right there in your neighborhood. Or if you want, there's so many opportunities in the area. And also I know there's some people that are out of state too, but there's a lot of park districts and forest preserve that have so many different trails where you can explore different types of habitats. So before I talk a little bit more specifically about hikes, I want to talk a little bit about how to be prepared for a hike to make it a little bit more enjoyable for not only the kids, but also for yourself too. So when we go on a hike with the kids, we always have a backpack with us. And there's certain things that you want to have for safety purposes. And also, if you have kids, they get hungry and they, need water, things like that. So you want to make sure you have water with you, snacks, definitely a first aid kit in case someone, gets a scratch. The other thing that might be helpful is maybe some poison ivy wipes. Also, one of the big things people, Allison had alluded to it, is people are sometimes afraid of different insects or ticks. So you may want to, make sure that you check for ticks when you're done. And one way, especially if you're going in a forest preserve or a park district, is really to stay on the trails, because then your chances of being exposed to poison ivy or getting a lot of ticks on you is a lot less if you stay on the trails. So that is a thought. And the other thing too is the ticks that we have around here are typically dog ticks, which do not carry the Lyme disease, and they usually take about 24 hours to embed. If that does happen, one simple way is if you have a credit card and you can use that to scrape the tick off. There's also these things called tick keys. Amy may have some of that in some of the resources at the end. And then if you want, some other ideas to stick in there is a field guide or some books about different animals, hand lenses, bug boxes. Maybe your kids like to draw or write about what they're seeing. So a little journal or even just a little notebook and a pencil. I would highly recommend not bringing crayons, because we learned last week in camp when it was really hot that the crayons melt. So you wouldn't want to have a melty backpack. So, but anyway, so that's just a way to be prepared, and make the hike enjoyable for you and your child. So again, some people get really intimidated about, oh my gosh, I need to know all these things. But one simple way to do it is just go out and do a sensory hike. So, let's go see what we can see. Let's go see what we can hear. Or maybe let's smell some different flowers or some different leaves. And kids really start getting into that when you really have them focusing on their different senses. The only thing is, I would say, with the feeling, that is one thing you probably want to be a little bit more careful with, especially with some things like you don't want them touching poison ivy, obviously, or maybe some plants that may have thorns. So just if you are going to do some feeling of things, maybe have them feel some bark or something that you might be a little bit more familiar with. And then if you have children that really like to be more contemplative and sit, you can maybe have them sit in a certain area and focus on what they're seeing, what they're hearing. Maybe ask them, what do you feel when you sit out here? What are you thinking? Or what do you wonder? What do you wonder about maybe that bird? Or what about that bee that's visiting that flower? And then maybe draw some of the things that they see. And I think sometimes by doing that, like having them focus sometimes on something, that it really gets them to look like close and really notice things. Because sometimes when I first take kids out on hikes, like when we first are with them, they're like just rushing down the trail. And I think sometimes if you stop them and have them focus more, then they really, really start to notice like what's around them. And Allison's going to speak a little bit more about sit spots in her talk. And so I'll let her go into more detail about that for more the contemplative. And then more active kids. There might be more kids that they really like to, do scavenger hunts or bingo sheets. And so there's all types of different resources to do that. Or there might be kids like, oh, they really like bugs, or they really like birds. So they really want to maybe see how many birds they can find or different types. So there's, again, all different kinds of resources. We have an example here of our wildflower walk. And again, Amy at the end, she will be providing links to those resources. Field Museum has an amazing place where you can look at their field guides. Here's one that they have for beginners field guide, which is really just a nice scavenger hunt that you could download. This is specifically for the summer, things that you would typically find around the Chicago area in the summer. They have ones for different seasons. They have ones, again, if your child is really into certain kinds of animals or plants, they have them more specific for birds or prairie flowers or woodlands, things like that. So again, a really great resource is, and you can download their field guides. And if there's some kids are super creative, you can even make your own field guide if you have a forest preserve that you really like to go to, and you could, make one for that. So if you want to get really, if you really want your kids to do some more science in the summer. But I hate to really call this a science lesson, because it's really more of a combination, because if you adopt a tree, you could, again, go to your backyard or go to a forest preserve and, go visit your tree, but you can draw it. So you're using creativity. You can do leaf rubbings, which is taking the leaf and then taking a crayon or a pencil and then rubbing the leaf to look at all the different patterns. You could do that also with bark. So again, it is a combination of science and art. And then also you can do some math. You can measure your tree. Like, how big do you think that tree is? How old do you think that tree is? What kind of animals do you notice that live on that tree? Are there bugs? Are there birds? Are there any that make homes there? So again, it's just some different ideas to have your children maybe be more focused, or something that they could do on a regular basis that they could go do. And then if there's some kids, they're like really tech savvy, or they want to do more. So there's a way to combine the technology and the nature. So there's so many amazing apps, and most of them are free. One that we use a lot is called the Merlin Bird ID by Cornell, which is amazing. We use it with kids as young as 3rd grade. I think kids younger than that can do it too, but it has really simple ways to identify birds in your area. And now they've even added bird calls. So you can actually have the kids go out and identify bird by bird calls. So this is by Cornell University. And, again, the kids that we work with love this because it's super simple, because you download what birds are in your area. It just asks simple questions about, what does your bird, what colors is it? How big is it? What is it doing? And then it comes up with different possibilities, and then they can learn more about that bird. And then if they find different birds, then they can also be involved in community science. And eBird, you can actually let them know what kind of birds you're seeing in the area, so the kids can actually be involved in community science. Another is iNaturalist. That's more for older kids, but they also have a Seek app that young kids can use. And it actually they make it fun, like by collecting badges and things like that. Another one is by the Botanic Garden, Chicago Botanic Garden, called Budburst. It's phenological studies where you can have kids like look at a certain plant, and it could be just in your backyard. When does it leaf out? When does it flower? When does the leaves turn color? So these are just a few examples. There are so many others that are available. So again, if your kid really likes technology, here's a way for them to combine that and nature, and also be involved in community science, helping scientists know what kind of plants and animals you're noticing in your neighborhood. So I think it is time for me to pass it on back to Allison.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. And I can't stress enough how important it is to give kids the tools to be able to name and understand what's in their surroundings. We talk about if you're going to love nature, you got to know nature. It's sort of like, do you have any best friends that you're any friends that you don't know their names? No. So you got to know the names of the plants and animals that live right where you are. I'm now going to talk to you about 2 ways to connect kids to nature that aren't through fact, that aren't through data and sort of the sciencey aspect. They're much more sort of sensory focused. The first is unstructured nature play. I don't know about you guys, but when I was little, my mom just would say, you need to get out of the house and you're not allowed to come back until it's dark. And that is sort of something that's a little bit of the past. Today, childhood is indoors on screens. And neighborhoods are pretty quiet. So we have a whole thought process around what is called unstructured nature play. Unstructured play is that make it up as you go play. It's the child-centered experience. And it's really important that it can happen in a place that's wild or feels wild. And you don't want a place that's way too protected, because this actually is a time when you do maybe want to go off trail and traipse around and feel like you're in the great outdoors. But you don't want to ruin any plants. So you want to make sure that you're not in a place that's super sensitive. Luckily, there's lots of great areas around where we live to do this in a way that's safe for kids, safe for nature as well. So it's about giving kids that sense of freedom. It's that open, imaginative, and child-centered play. That means that the kid isn't responding to you to have to report what they are doing, to have to sort of like process it through whatever's going through your mind as the adult. And I don't know about you, but for me, this is actually super hard. I like to know, what's the plan? Where are we going? What are we getting out of this? And this is a way that you got to kind of let some of that go and let the children lead. Now, if you need something to do, you don't have to make up what you're going to play. You can say things like, I can describe the activities. You might want to say, I noticed you picked up a gray rock. Or, I see you have a gray rock in your hand. I noticed that that's a heavy rock or a texture. And especially for real young folks, it's a good way to expose them to vocabulary in whatever language you want to share with them. And often we want to include that elemental nature and so as we go. And I just want to say this is actually super easy to set up in your own backyard, and there's lots of resources on how to do that. We also have a lot of places that are incorporating nature play spaces. This is an example at Lyman Woods. It's located in Downers Grove, but these are popping up all over the place, even in very urban areas. As you can see, this is a place that has some open areas, so you aren't worried about your kids getting all sorts of ticks and poison ivy on them. They've got what we call loose parts, loose objects that can be moved around. Great for those muscle skills. This is my little 2-year-old, and he's trying to lift all of those logs and move them around and using all sorts of different muscles and skills to do that in a way that's very creative and imaginative. So it's a great way to let kids initiate the play. This is what they initiate, they guide it, they can change it, and they can abandon it, and they can leave it. There's no formal objectives, and there's very few rules. And it's just important that kids are allowed to engage in a way that feels good to them. It could be that you're catching tiny critters, collecting leaves or rocks, digging, splashing, climbing a tree. It's about playing with nature, not just playing in nature. And this is very related to a concept called forest therapy. And we do at the Conservation Foundation, we do offer forest therapy experiences primarily for adults, and I invite you to come out with us if you ever get a chance. This is inspired by forest bathing, which was born in Japan in the 1980s. It's a way to experience the outdoors through all of your senses. So you smell, touch, sight, sound, even taste. And if you've got that toddler that wants to taste everything, I might just encourage them to instead taste the air, which is a very actually very fun way to kind of wake up and see, well, does the air in this direction taste the same as the air in this direction, and why? You can kind of tune into that. But it also includes the imaginative sense, the sort of larger than life sense about the sort of the spirit of the natural areas that we might be in. There's a few different ways that you can kind of tune into this. I will say that children are inherently forest bathers until it's sort of, they're taught not to. They are always experiencing the world through their senses and bringing a sense of imagination to what they're doing. And so for us as adults, it's about tuning into that. A sit spot is a very fancy way to say, you're going to find the spot that's special to you, the spot that's calling to you, and sit there for a while and just hang out with your surroundings and notice what you see. For me, with my kids, I just said, here's your placemat. What's the spot that you really want to sit in, and see what you can check out. My little guy here on the right really likes our backyard chicken, so that's always where he sits anyways. And he was just excited to have something exciting to actually sit on. And it's okay. You don't have to sit there for a certain amount of time. You don't have to achieve anything. It's just a way to say, I'm going to be here and tune in right where I am. And the prompts that Carolyn gave and the idea of journaling there is a great idea that you could incorporate as well. Another one that I like is sort of a mobile nature play. You can do this indoors or outdoors. You could take it with you. You have a placemat, and you just have loose objects and that you can find: shells, rocks, seeds, pine cones, sticks, any of those things, and just gather a bunch of them together. And you can say, this is your canvas. You don't have to make art with it, but you can create whatever you want. And when you have that palette, then you may find that people want to arrange them in certain ways, or that rock might turn into a toad, or it might turn into a superhero. And the next thing you know, the whole thing can come alive. I've actually done this even with adults, and it helps them tap into sort of that creative sense when you have sort of the boundary of where you get to play on. So easy, very low cost activity. You can do it indoors or out at any time. Also, gardening is a great way to connect kids to the outdoors. So I want to hand it back to Connie, who's one of our gardening experts and helps with our children garden at McDonald Farm, which I hope that you all come visit as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly it. Gardening is something that we don't, when we're talking about getting kids out in nature and having fun activities to do with them out in nature, we don't necessarily think of gardening at the top of our heads. We think of more the forest preserves, the prairies, climbing trees, and a little more wild space. And we tend to think of the garden as a little bit more, domesticated. It's a little bit of a more controlled environment. It's something that we are cultivating. And it's not quite as wild of a space, but that can be a really good space to have as an introduction to a lot of different things in nature. And this can be done whether you have a plot at a community garden, or if you have backyard space, or a pot on a balcony if you're in an apartment. So really, this is something that is pretty accessible and can be done at a small or a large scale. So there are a lot of really, really fun ways to get kids involved with gardening. And it really brings in opportunity to talk about all kinds of things like pollinators, or the butterflies that come into the garden, and watching the caterpillars and trying to see then if we can find a cocoon or a chrysalis. Where did they go if we don't see the caterpillars anymore? Did a bird eat them? Have we noticed any birds around the garden? And so it really does, even though it's something that we are somewhat controlling a little bit more and trying to nurture and grow ourselves, even if it's just in the little pot, it really brings in so many opportunities to explore nature close up. And so some of my favorite tips for gardening with kids include, first of all, just letting them have their own space, whether it's just a pot, or if it's a row in the garden, or their own bed. If they can have their own space, and it can be part of a shared overall space, a family garden or a larger space, but let them have their own section, their own part of it, and really give them that ownership, and they get excited about taking care of that space. And so one thing that we do at the farm with some of these spaces is we give them themes, and that's something that can be really fun you know, to get the kids excited. And so some of the themes we tie them into educational programming, but these can just be fun in general. You can see the picture here of the rainbow garden. And so each year we'll pick different things that we're growing that represent all of the different colors of the rainbow. So we might have red tomatoes, orange carrots, maybe some yellow peppers, green lettuce. For blue, we really like to do a kind of kale called dinosaur kale because the kids like the name. It's also called a Tuscan kale or lacinato kale, but it has a bluish color to the leaves. So it's really cool. And it's fairly easy to grow. Again, we have to watch out for those caterpillars, but that's a learning opportunity. We do have some cabbage butterflies that like to lay their eggs and they hatch out and the little caterpillars like to nibble on those leaves, and we have to try to get them, you know, get the good leaves before the caterpillars get them all. But it's a lot of fun to watch for the other insects that come in looking for those caterpillars and hunting the caterpillars and the birds that come in. So yeah, it's hard to think of a blue plant, but that blue dinosaur kale is a really good one. And then for purple, we might do things like a purple basil or purple kohlrabi, which is really fun if you've never tried to grow that. Purple cabbage. So we do have a lot of, you know, there's so many different colors of things that we can grow. So that's just one example of a theme, but you could do a pizza garden, a salsa garden. We've done the Three Sisters garden, which if you're not familiar with that, I would definitely look that up. It's got a really good story that goes with it. That's an indigenous method of gardening that has been around for a very long time, pairing these plants together. And so you can teach them the story and the history with that and a little bit about the land that we're growing on. And yeah, so just the themes are a whole lot of fun. But then the other side of that is with them having their own space with or without a theme, it also is important, you know, kind of like Allison mentioned, to relinquish a little bit of the control and let the kids do it. And when they have their own space, let them actually have it be theirs and let them take care of it. They can plant the seeds, even very, very young ones, you know, just with a little bit of guidance and teaching them how deep do we put the seed and how much water do we give it. With just a little bit of guidance, they can do it. They can plant the seeds themselves. They can put in plants themselves. They're actually, you know, they're really, really good and they get really into it. And then one thing that we have at the farm also that I think is really important is our soil station. A lot of times when kids go outside, we tend to tell them to not get dirty, or if we're gardening, we tell them not to dig because we don't want them digging up plants that we've put in. You know, we want to keep those there. We don't want to dig those up. But to give them a space where they're allowed to dig and explore and find worms, even if it's in, like if you have a small composting system, a little tumbler or a little pile or a bin where they can help to turn that pile or, you know, add to it. Maybe if you had, I don't know, a little lettuce in the fridge that was getting wilted, let the kids shred it up into small little pieces and put it in the compost and mix it in. Let them actually get in there and dig in, literally, and explore a little bit. Let them get a little dirty. It's okay. It's good for us. And the other thing too that I would say is a really good tip is to let them, going back to that ownership of that space, let them have their own tools. So if they have small tools that fit their hands, if they have their own gardening gloves, their own watering can, all of those things, that really goes a long way in helping them feel comfortable in the space and letting them have that ownership and that control over that space, not control, but you know what I mean, that they're caring for and nurturing that space and that they have their own tools to do so. So another thing that I think is really fun, in addition to the themes that we mentioned, and those are just a few, you can go crazy coming up with some really fun themes. In addition to giving them interesting themes to get them excited, it's really fun to choose some different varieties than what you would typically find in the grocery store and just really have fun with what you choose to grow and let them choose. So if you're in, you know, the garden center or at a plant sale, let them pick out a plant for themselves. And then I mentioned Mr. Stripey on here because that was the first question or the first tomato that my daughter grew when she was little. She picked it out when we were out at a farm for a plant sale. They had these heirloom tomatoes. It was called Mr. Stripey, and it had this cute little picture of a little tomato with a little face on it on the tag. So we brought home Mr. Stripey, and she took care of Mr. Stripey all summer long. She was about 2 or 3 years old. And so there are a lot of really fun varieties that, you know, can just make it fun for the kids. On the lower left here, this green tomato, it's called a green zebra. So some of these just have really fun names. And if we're used to only seeing the red tomatoes at the store, it's kind of fun to grow one that is pink or green or purple or a different color when it's ripe. And so then all the way on the far right, these beans over here, you know, we're used to green beans, maybe some yellow beans, but there are also, this one is called a dragon's tongue bean. So again, with those fun names, and they are purple and green striped. There are pink beans and purple beans and all kinds of fun things that you can grow. And there are also beans that are called yard long beans because they really do grow to be about a yard long. They're really, really long. And so those are fun just to see, like hanging from a trellis and getting to pick those. Down here, I don't know if you guys can see at the bottom, the little green, they almost look like watermelons. We call those mouse melons, or they're also called cucamelons. It's a Mexican sour gherkin, which is a cucumber. It's a very small variety, and the kids like to pick those and just snack on them. It is just a cucumber, so most kids like to eat them. But because they're so little and they kind of look like a watermelon, we call those mouse melons. So it's just really fun to come up with really cool different varieties, purple peppers instead of a green pepper. Just have fun with it. And then, you know, there are the tried and true favorites. Like if you grow giant sunflowers, those are even fun for us. Imagine, you know, being much smaller and seeing these huge sunflower plants. And a fun thing to do with those, if you have the space, is to plant them kind of in a circle and then leave a space. And as they grow, it becomes kind of a fort, you know, a circle of these giant sunflowers with a space to go inside. It makes a nice little, either a sit spot or a reading spot, or just a fun spot to get some shade and hang out in the garden. And we always have things like watermelons and pumpkins that the kids love to grow, where a lot of times people think they don't have room or don't have space, but there are smaller varieties that you can do in a small space. So just have fun with your selections. Maybe pick out, even if you're only growing 1 or 2 things, do something a little different. And that's a really good way to get the kids involved and get them outside. So on that note, when we are growing all of these things, we want to harvest them and hopefully encourage the kids to eat them. And they really are much more likely to try something that they have grown themselves, harvested themselves, prepared themselves. So we do this at camp. The kids harvest for 2 things every day. They harvest in the morning for tea. We have a tea garden where they harvest with us, and we make like basically a sun tea that we'll try at snack time. It's not tea, there's no caffeine, it's on a tea leaf. We don't grow those here, but these are herbal teas, and they're all things that are kid friendly. And so then we also harvest at snack time some produce from the garden, and we harvest some herbs to make a dip, which I'll talk about in a minute. But then that way the kids can try the veggies that they're harvesting with the dip made from the herbs that they're also growing and harvesting. And that's a lot of fun. But harvesting is one of those things that we always say to do together. So some, again, you know, we've got our supervised and unsupervised activities. Harvesting is good to do together for a couple of reasons. One, different plants get harvested in different ways. So a tomato, when it's ripe, will just come off the vine nice and easily. But something else like a bean or a pea, if you try to just pull that off the vine, the whole plant will come right out of the ground. So it takes a little bit of a different technique. So we can learn and practice harvesting. Some of our plants like zucchini can actually be a little pokey. Like they're kind of, you know, they can be scratchy. So maybe they want some help to harvest some of those things. Some might need to be cut instead of just picked. And the other thing is, what's a big challenge with our gardening? Sometimes weeds pop up. And so we want to make sure that we're harvesting the right thing. So there's a safety issue there too. We always tell the kids, make sure you're harvesting with us so that we know that, you know, what we're harvesting is the right plant and that it's ripe and ready to harvest and that we're doing it the right way. So it's a really fun activity to do together. And then letting them have part in the prep. So washing the vegetables or the herbs, and actually on the next slide here, I'll show you that too. we've got, definitely we like to get the kids involved in the harvest. So they can help to chop, and I don't know if you can see in that center picture, we have kid safe knives, which kind of look like this. If you can see, I know it's small on your screen, but it's a plastic. These are kid friendly knives and they can do some chopping and it's not going to cut, you know, little fingers. I think you'd have to try hard. You probably could if you tried really hard, but it's not an accidental thing that should happen easily. It's a pretty child safe method of letting them get involved with the prep. And then we also have, for chopping our herbs, for making salad dressings and dip, we use, and the kids love to try these out, these are called herb scissors. And instead of just having like the 2 blades that cut, this actually has a set of 4 or 5. And so things like chives or basil or dill, we can just chop that a little bit more quickly. And the kids, we teach them safety and they can chop that up to help make a dip. Very simple. We've got a recipe on here for making dip. The kids love to do that. And to get them involved in that process of the washing, the prepping, the chopping, the stirring, the mixing, the tasting, you know, they really enjoy that. So yeah, so these are all good ways. And again, you know, the whole process beginning to end, we're outside, we are talking about pollination and all of these other things. So it's a really good way to tie in nature with something that, you know, we all eat. So it's a good way to get them involved that way as well. It's a good entry level, you know, entry point for getting them out in nature a little bit and learning where our food comes from and how to grow it in a clean and sustainable way that's healthy for us and healthy for our environments. So I think the main idea from what all of us would like to get across is that, you know, just have fun with it. Just get out there. You don't have to be an expert. We don't have to, you know everything about everything, just to be able to go out and enjoy and have our time together with the kids, get them out in nature, go for a walk, observe some things, use our senses, and, you know, hopefully you guys will be able to incorporate a lot of these tips in whatever ways work best for you and your families and neighbors. And we will be sharing resources. Oh, good. Amy just posted it. Thank you. I was just getting to that, the tiny URL that's on here on this screen. We'll have some of the resources that we've mentioned in the presentation. So like the scavenger hunts and sensory hikes and things like that. And yeah, we will take questions. If anybody else wants to add to anything that I didn't touch on there at the end, feel free to chime in. Our wonderful panel, thank you all so much. I really enjoyed all those tips too. It's always really fun for me to get to hear what everybody else has to say too. It's really helpful and a good reminder and good tips. So yeah, feel free to chime in and we will go ahead and go to the Q&A and the chat and see if we've got any questions that we can answer for you.
Connie, one person is asking, how do you encourage kids to do the chores in the garden, such as weeding? And where do you find all the interesting plant seeds?
Great questions. So, you know, it's funny because I always joke about that. When I was younger, my parents would have me go out and weed. You know, they had a garden and I never thought that I would enjoy doing this as an adult or would want to do it for work, because I was like, who wants to, you know, they made me do that. It was a job and I didn't love it. So I think if we can, anything we can do that makes it not so much of a chore. And if we talk about like, oh, look at this plant that's popping up right next to our tomato. Is that supposed to be there? Like, you know, and what is a weed? Even just having those conversations that it might not even be a bad plant. Some of our weeds are actually really great plants. They happen to grow where we didn't want them to grow. So maybe let's pull it out. And is this one we can put in the compost or not? And just talk more about nurturing the plants that we're growing than about doing the job of pulling the weeds or weeding, and just try to keep it fun and keep it about, you know, let's take this one out so that the butterflies can find our cucumber plant more easily, you know, and come visit the flowers, or so that the, you know, that fuzzy bumblebee might find the flower better if we move the weed out of the way. Depends on the kids' ages, you know, but that's just one idea, is to try to change the focus a little bit away from the chore.
I just want to add to that. So with Mighty Acorns, a lot of times we are doing stewardship. And so they always want to have a competition, like who can pull the most garlic mustard, who can cut down the biggest honeysuckle. And a couple weeks ago, Connie and I were doing summer camp, and the theme for one day was stewardship. And Connie was talking a lot about the pollinator plants, but I was talking about invasive plants. And we had the kids in our one butterfly garden. We talked about how there were some invasive plants getting in there, thistles. And at first they're like, oh, but then by the end they were like, who was going to pull out the biggest thistle? They were getting so excited about. So a lot of times I think it's like the kids kind of get a competition between themselves about who's going to get the most or the biggest, or so it kind of becomes a game a little bit too.
Yeah, that's true. And just trying to see like how many different kinds of weeds can we find, or how many of the dandelions can we find in this space, and yeah, again, it depends on the kids' ages, but there are ways, to try to, I think changing the focus a little bit and make it a little more fun. Yeah, that was really funny. We got some great pictures too of the kids holding up these giant weeds that they had pulled out, and they were all comparing sizes to see who pulled the biggest and who got the most of the roots out and all of that. And then for finding all of those different cool varieties, really anywhere that if you are comfortable trying to grow things from seed, then you can order from, there are all kinds of catalogs and online sources for ordering all kinds of cool varieties of seeds. Heirloom seeds like Baker Creek heirloom seeds, they have a lot of really cool varieties that come out every year. But also like at McDonald Farm, when we have the plant sale, some of the vegetables and herbs that we have are heirloom varieties. We've had those dragon tongue beans before and some really cool things. Ground cherries, that's another really fun one for the kids to grow. All kinds of different things. So plant sales, I seem to find more of the cool, interesting things when I'm looking specifically for the heirloom varieties. So even garden centers, when they sell heirlooms, I would just look for the heirlooms and you'll probably find some cool things that you haven't seen elsewhere.
I think, are you familiar with the heirloom out of Iowa, Seed Savers, heirloom seeds?
Seed Savers Exchange, yeah, that's another great source, yeah, and even seed libraries. So it can be a little bit harder to find the plants that someone else has already started for you, but some garden centers do have a good selection, and they're at the farm. We've got a good selection as well when we do the spring plant sale. But yeah, for seeds, you have many, many more options for finding some really cool things.
And I was just going to say, to tie in the arts connection as well, one of the things that we've done is have them pull, especially garlic mustard, dandelions. I mean, a lot of those things that we consider weeds are actually quite beautiful. And so we pull them and then we put them in a little canister, and it's a bouquet, and we have a bouquet, and that's what sits on the table. And then we just make sure that we compost it if it's not, gone to seed, or we trash bag it if it's something that we don't want to spread.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions for us? It's just about 8 o'clock, so if anybody would like to ask any other questions, we'll happily answer, and then otherwise we'll go ahead and let you go. Like Allison said, you can go outside. All right, wonderful. Don't see anything else. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you do have questions after the fact, or you think of something later on, go ahead and email us. We did put the contact information into the chat. So info@theconservationfoundation.org. Feel free also to peruse the website and come out and visit us at the farm. So, you can come and see the children's garden too and explore all of these natural areas. We've got, with the water and the wetlands and a little woodland trail and a prairie and all kinds of stuff, an edible forest garden, all kinds of fun spaces, a sensory garden. So McDonald Farm is open during regular business hours. It's open to the public. So come on out and visit us, bring a picnic, come and hang out and explore the farm a little bit. Bring your young ones and come join us. We'd love to see you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you to my fellow educators and presenters. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Have a great night.